You have been living as a stranger in your own life, moving through days that feel borrowed from someone else's story, carrying the weight of expectations that were never yours to bear. And the deepest tragedy is not that you feel lost, but that you have forgotten you were ever found. Friedrich Nietzsche understood this particular form of suffering, the agony of the man who has traded his authentic self for the approval of others, who has learned to wear masks so convincingly that he no longer remembers his original face. And in the forbidden technique I'm about to share with you, his revolutionary insights will show you how to strip away every false layer until what remains is so undeniably you that your soul will finally remember who you really are. This is not therapy. This is not philosophy. This is the dangerous art of becoming the man you were meant to be before the world convinced you to become someone else. And once you understand what Nietzsche discovered about the nature of authentic existence, you will never again be able to pretend that your current life is enough. You walk through life carrying the weight of 1,000 voices that are not your own. Society has performed the greatest magic trick in human history, convincing you that their borrowed dreams are your authentic desires. Every morning you wake up wearing a mask so perfectly fitted that you have forgotten your original face beneath it. The modern world has turned you into a sleepwalker, moving through existence without ever touching the raw electricity of your own being. Nietzsche saw this tragedy unfolding over a century ago, this systematic erasure of individual greatness in favor of comfortable conformity. You have been taught to seek approval rather than truth, safety rather than growth, belonging rather than becoming. The institutions that claim to educate you have instead domesticated you, turning a wild force of nature into a predictable consumer of other people's ideas. Your soul remembers something different, something fiercer, but the memory grows fainter with each passing day of surrender. The forbidden technique begins with a simple recognition that everything you think you know about yourself might be a carefully constructed lie. When you stop long enough to listen beneath the noise of social conditioning, you hear the faint whisper of your essential nature calling you home. This is not the comfortable self that seeks validation from others, but the dangerous self that creates its own values and walks its own path. The great forgetting can only be reversed by the courage to remember what you were before the world told you who to be. You have been infected with a poison so subtle that you mistake it for medicine, a moral system designed to keep you small, while convincing you that smallness is virtue. The slave morality that Nietzsche exposed operates like a parasite in your mind, feeding on your natural strength and transforming it into guilt, shame, and self-doubt. It whispers that your desires are selfish, your ambitions are corrupt, and your power is dangerous. Every time you feel the stirring of your authentic nature, this internalized voice of the weak judges you back into submission. This is not the morality of the strong who create their own values, but the resentful morality of those who cannot bear to see others rise above mediocrity. It teaches you to celebrate suffering as noble, to view weakness as virtuous, and to see your own greatness as a sin against the collective. The slave morality convinces you that true goodness lies in self-sacrifice, in making yourself smaller, so others feel bigger, in apologizing for the very qualities that make you exceptional. It has turned your natural hierarchy of values upside down, making you ashamed of what should make you proud. The chains of slave morality are invisible but stronger than steel because you have learned to forge them yourself. You police your own thoughts, suppress your own desires, and punish yourself for crimes you never committed. Breaking free requires recognizing that much of what you call conscience is actually the voice of the herd speaking through you. When you stop seeking permission to be magnificent, when you stop apologizing for your strength, you begin to taste the freedom that comes from creating your own moral universe. Deep beneath the layers of social conditioning and learned helplessness, lies a force so primal and pure that it terrifies those who have forgotten their own strength. This is not the crude desire for domination over others, but the fundamental drive to overcome yourself, to expand your capabilities, and to express your unique essence in the world without apology. The will to power is your birthright as a conscious being, the creative force that seeks to shape reality according to your deepest vision. Most men have buried this force so deeply that they experience it only as a vague restlessness, a sense that something essential is missing from their carefully ordered lives. Your will to power manifests not in crushing others, but in the relentless pursuit of your own excellence, in the refusal to accept limitations that others try to impose upon you. It drives you to question everything, to test your boundaries, to push beyond what feels safe and comfortable into the territory where growth becomes possible. This force does not seek easy victories or external validation, but the harder conquest of your own fears, weaknesses, and self-imposed limitations. When you align with your will to power, you stop asking permission from the world and start demanding excellence from yourself. The sleeping giant within you awakens not through aggression, but through the courage to become who you truly are, despite the cost. It requires you to embrace the responsibility of self-creation, to stop blaming others for your circumstances, and to channel your energy into the magnificent work of sculpting yourself into something worthy of your own respect. When you feel this force stirring, when you sense the possibility of becoming more than you currently are, you are touching the essence of what Nietzsche called the will to power. Imagine that every choice you have made, every moment of weakness, every act of courage, every betrayal and every triumph must be lived again exactly as it happened, not once but infinitely across endless cycles of time. This is Nietzsche's most terrifying and liberating thought experiment, the eternal recurrence that separates those who truly love their lives from those who merely endure them. When you consider living your exact life again and again without the possibility of change, something profound happens in your soul. Either you feel a crushing despair at the thought of repeating your mistakes forever, or you discover a fierce joy in the life you have created. Most men would recoil in horror at the prospect of eternal recurrence because they have filled their days with compromise, resentment, and the slow suicide of unfulfilled potential. They have spent years accumulating regrets like debt, living in ways that require the consolation of a better tomorrow to make today bearable. The thought of being locked forever into their current patterns reveals the depth of their self-betrayal, the extent to which they have been living someone else's life while waiting for permission to begin their own. But for the man who has learned to create his own values and live according to his deepest truth, eternal recurrence becomes not a curse, but a blessing. He looks at his life with all its struggles and imperfections and says yes, not just once, but infinitely. This is the ultimate test of self-acceptance, the measure of whether you have truly become who you are or remain trapped in who others expect you to be. When you can embrace your life so completely that you would choose to live it exactly the same way, forever, you have achieved something most men never even attempt. The most radical act you can perform in this age of moral conformity is to step beyond the comfortable categories of good and evil that society uses to control your thoughts and actions. You have been conditioned to see the world through the lens of inherited moral judgments, accepting without question the values that were programmed into you before you developed the capacity for independent thought. Nietzsche challenges you to move beyond this childish morality into the dangerous territory where you must create your own meaning, forge your own path, and take full responsibility for the consequences of your choices. This does not mean abandoning all principles or descending into nihilistic chaos, but rather ascending to a higher form of morality that springs from your own authentic nature rather than external authority. You begin to evaluate actions not by how they conform to social expectations, but by how they serve your becoming, your growth, your movement toward the fullest expression of your potential. Some choices that society calls good may actually be poison to your development, while some that it condemns may be essential for your transformation into who you truly are. The man who lives beyond good and evil has stopped seeking approval from the moral authorities of his time and has begun the I-Shi, terrifying work of becoming his own authority. He judges his actions by their fruits in his own life, by whether they make him stronger or weaker, more authentic or more false, closer to his essential nature or further from it. This is not selfishness, but the highest form of responsibility. The courage to live according to your own deepest wisdom, rather than the borrowed certainties of others. Within you lives a possibility so magnificent and terrifying that most men spend their entire lives running from it rather than toward it. This is not some fantasy of superhuman powers, but the potential to transcend the limitations that keep ordinary men trapped in cycles of mediocrity and complaint. The Übermensch is not a destination, but a direction. Not a fixed state, but a continuous process of self-overcoming that requires you to destroy and recreate yourself again and again. You carry within your current form the seed of something greater, but it will only grow if you have the courage to let everything small and false about yourself die. The path to your higher potential demands that you stop seeking comfort and start seeking transformation. Stop avoiding difficulty and start embracing the struggle that forges strength. You must learn to love the process of becoming more than the security of remaining the same, to value growth over safety, truth over popularity, authentic power over borrowed authority. This transformation happens not through wishful thinking, but through the daily practice of choosing the harder path, the one that leads upward rather than sideways, the one that demands more from you rather than less. Your Übermensch nature emerges when you stop waiting for the world to give you permission to be great and start giving yourself the command to exceed your current limitations. It requires you to become comfortable with being misunderstood by those who have settled for less, to stand alone when necessary, to create your own values when the inherited ones prove inadequate. The man who awakens this potential within himself becomes a force of nature, not destructive but creative, not dominating but inspiring, showing others what becomes possible when someone refuses to accept the boundaries that society tries to impose. The highest achievement of human consciousness is not the ability to change your circumstances, but the capacity to embrace them so completely that you would not alter a single detail of your story, even if you possessed unlimited power to do so. Amor fati, the love of fate, represents the ultimate liberation from the victim mentality that keeps most men trapped in cycles of resentment and blame. This is not passive resignation, but active acceptance, not surrender, but the recognition that everything that has happened to you, including your greatest failures and deepest wounds, has been necessary for the creation of who you are becoming. When you truly understand Amor fati, you stop wasting energy on regret and begin to see your entire life as a perfectly orchestrated symphony in which every note, even the discordant one, serves the greater composition. Your betrayals taught you discernment, your losses taught you what truly matters, your failures taught you humility, and your suffering taught you compassion for your own humanity. The man who loves his fate completely has discovered that there are no mistakes in his story, only experiences that have contributed to his development in ways he could not have planned or predicted. This radical acceptance does not make you passive, but paradoxically gives you tremendous power because you are no longer fighting against reality, but working with it as a creative partner. You stop asking why certain things happened to you and start asking how you can use everything that has happened as raw material for your continued becoming. When you can look at your entire life with gratitude rather than complaint, when you can see beauty in your struggles and wisdom in your pain, you have achieved something that most men never even attempt to reach. Creation and destruction are not opposites but dance partners in the cosmic ballet of becoming, and nowhere is this more evident than in the process of discovering your authentic self. You cannot build the temple of your true identity on the foundation of lies you have been telling yourself for years. The creative force that Nietzsche recognized as fundamental to human nature requires you to become an artist of destruction first, systematically dismantling every false persona, every borrowed dream, every inherited limitation that stands between you and your essential nature. This destruction is not violence but surgery, not chaos but precision, cutting away everything that is not truly you, so that what remains can finally breathe and grow. You must be willing to let die the version of yourself that seeks approval from others, the one that plays it safe to avoid criticism, the one that has learned to make itself small to fit into spaces designed for mediocre men. Each false identity that you release creates space for something more authentic to emerge, but the process requires the courage to live temporarily without any identity at all. The creative force within you is not interested in your comfort or your security, but in your truth and your growth. It will burn through your carefully constructed defenses, expose your self-deceptions, and demand that you face the terrifying question of who you actually are beneath all the masks you have learned to wear. This destruction is not punishment but liberation, not an ending but a beginning, the necessary clearing of ground so that something magnificent can finally take root and flourish in the soil of your authentic being. In a world that worships connection and fears silence, the man who seeks his authentic nature must learn to become comfortable with his own company, not as an escape from life, but as preparation for living it fully. Solitude is not loneliness, but the conscious choice to step away from the noise of other people's opinions, expectations, and energy, so that you can hear the quiet voice of your own wisdom speaking beneath the chaos. Most men are so afraid of being alone with themselves that they fill every moment with distraction, noise, and the company of others, never allowing space for their authentic nature to reveal itself. The path to self-mastery requires periods of deliberate isolation where you can observe your thoughts without the influence of external validation or judgment. In solitude, you discover which of your desires are truly yours and which have been planted by others, which of your fears are rational and which are inherited, which of your dreams serve your becoming and which serve your need for acceptance. This is not antisocial behavior, but the most social act possible, preparing yourself to offer the world your authentic gifts rather than your performed persona. When you master the art of solitude, you transform from someone who needs others to feel complete into someone who chooses others from a place of abundance rather than emptiness. You stop using relationships to avoid yourself and start using them to express yourself. Stop seeking others to fill your voids and start sharing your fullness. The man who can be alone without being lonely has discovered the secret of true independence, the foundation upon which all genuine connection must be built. Life is not a problem to be solved, but a dance to be danced. And the man who has remembered his essential nature moves through existence, not with the heavy steps of duty and obligation, but with the light feet of someone who has learned to say yes to the full spectrum of human experience. You are not meant to be a saint or a sinner, but something far more interesting, a complete human being who contains within himself the capacity for both creation and destruction, love and rage, gentleness and fierce strength. The dance of life requires you to embrace all of these aspects rather than trying to eliminate the ones that make others uncomfortable. Most men have been taught to deny half of their nature, to suppress their darkness in pursuit of an impossible purity that leaves them weak and incomplete. They try to be good all the time instead of being real all the time, spiritual instead of human, perfect instead of authentic. But the man who truly knows himself recognizes that his shadow contains not just his weaknesses, but also his untapped power, his repressed creativity, his unexpressed vitality. The dance of life becomes possible only when you stop fighting against parts of yourself and start integrating them into a coherent whole. When you finally remember who you really are, you discover that you are neither purely good nor purely evil, but something far more magnificent, a conscious force capable of choosing your own direction and creating your own meaning. You stop apologizing for your complexity and start celebrating it. Stop trying to fit into other people's categories and start creating your own. The dance of life is the eternal movement between all the possibilities contained within your nature, the joyful acceptance of yourself as a work of art that will never be finished but can always become more beautiful. The forbidden technique is now yours. But knowing it and living it are two different battles, and the question that will determine everything is this. When you look in the mirror tonight, will you see the man you truly are, or the man others have told you to be? Share in the comments below the one false identity you are ready to destroy, the mask you have worn for too long, the lie about yourself that you are finally prepared to abandon because your transformation begins the moment you stop hiding from your own truth. If this awakened something in you that has been sleeping for too long, subscribe now for more forbidden wisdom that will help you remember who you really are, beneath all the conditioning, all the fear, all the comfortable lies that have kept you small.